It's working. I hope it is. Good morning. I'm Robert Beatty, or so I believe. I'm coming to you from Portland, Oregon. And this is a broadcast of the Portland Insight Meditation Community. If you're on Facebook or YouTube and would like to participate more fully, you can find us on, you can find the address at robertbeatty.com or portlandinsight.org. You can find the link. I'm in a little bit of an altered state this morning, having watched the movie. I've also lost my mind. I can't find that. Nomads last night. Very touching, very potent. The truth of anicca shining brightly, true impermanence. And a procedural note, on yesterday, I turned off the chat. It came to my attention recently that there's at least one and probably more people who have been hurt by the fact that I didn't respond to what they wrote in the chat. Please note, I am 73 years old. I handle a lot of technology here. I did not grow up having chat on the sidebar going all the time, and it's beyond my capacity. So if you want to say something to me, it has to be verbally, or Jim, maybe if something comes up that I really should see, let me know. So anyway, my apologies if I haven't responded, and please don't anticipate that I will, because I can't follow the chat as well as do everything else that I do here. So I've decided to leave it on because some people said it really is helpful, though I have a little concern for it. Something I learned from my other teacher friends is that lots of meditation things don't have the chat on. And if we were in the Dharma hall, the chat wouldn't be on. Because it's also a great invitation to be busy doing something else rather than actually participating in the meditation or the conversation. So, leaving it for now on these morning broadcasts, but I encourage us to do the best we can given the circumstances. So, the Crystal Globe from Father Theophane. I told the guest master I'd like to become a monk. Hang on. Nah. I told the guest master I'd like to become a monk. What kind of monk, he asked. A real one? Yes, I said. He poured me a cup of wine. Here, take this. No sooner had I drunk it than I became aware of a crystal globe forming around me. It began to expand until finally it surrounded him too. This monk, who a minute before had seemed so commonplace, now took on an astonishing beauty. I was struck dumb. After a bit, the thought came to me, maybe I should tell him how beautiful he is. Maybe he doesn't even know. But I really was dumb. That wine had burned out my tongue. But so great was my happiness at the sight of such beauty that I thought it was well worth the price of my tongue. When he made me a sign to leave, I turned away, confident that the memory of that beauty would be a joy forever. But what was my surprise when I found out that each person I met, it was the same. As soon as he would pass unwittingly into my crystal globe, I could see his beauty too. And this was true for all people. And I knew it was real. Is this what it means to be a real monk? To see the beauty in others and be silent? Oh, yes. So let us remind ourselves of the refuges. I take refuge in the Buddha, the one who shows me the way in this life. Namo Buddhaya, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Buddhaya. I take refuge in the Dharma, the way of understanding and love. Namo Dharmaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Dharmaya. I take refuge in the Sangha, the community of mindful harmony. Namo Sangaya, Namo Sangaya, Namo Sangaya. I take refuge in being awake. Only through being awake can we see what's happening. Can we learn from what's happening? So let's come home to the body. There's absolutely no telling, no predicting what we will encounter in any moment. Perhaps this morning the mind is very much at rest. Or maybe it's in uproar in some way or another. The body is here and it's breathing. And we can use this, the density, the slow changingness of the body as a kind of anchor. Each breath has a beginning. It rises to fullness It declines, it vanishes. Something very mysterious is happening in that there is awareness. There's awareness and there are objects in awareness. There's the sound of this voice, there's hearing. There are thoughts. One thought leads to another thought. Awareness illuminates it, and then thoughts are seen as objects. Each breath has its beginning. Each thought has its beginning. Every single experience of our lives have their beginnings. They have their coming to fullness. The springtime and summer of our lives. They have their decline and their ending. Please find a stable posture. Don't make it a posture you have to work at. Find a way you can sit for half an hour, 40 minutes, or an hour with little struggle. Park. Breathing in and breathing out. Notice how the body breathes itself. It doesn't take any reminding. Perhaps this is one of those times when the mind is very easily concentrated. When there's a lot of peace, when the enlightenment factors are blossoming. Acknowledging the ease, the concentration, the mind resting comfortably and breathing in and breathing out. Or maybe the hindrances are in blossom. Maybe there's restlessness and agitation. Maybe there's fear or anger, worry. Maybe there's just wanting something to be different, or disliking, aversion, or doubt, or sleepy dullness, or just confusion. Letting there be room for what actually is in this moment. Allowing curiosity to be right in the forefront. What's happening? What's happening right now? using in-breathing and out-breathing as a vehicle for calming, stabilizing, tranquilizing the mind. Letting the body sit like a rock. How still and heavy can the body be? If you tune into the earth element, matter, heaviness, hearing. Sounds arise and pass away. No distraction. No interruption. How could there be an interruption in life? And let us also remember our intention to bring love to our practice. So great was my happiness at the sight of such beauty that I thought it was well worth the price of my tongue. It was to my surprise that I found that every person I met, it was the same. As soon as they would pass unwittingly into my crystal globe, I would see their beauty too. Let's start with ourselves. I aspire to love and accept myself exactly as I am in this moment. It isn't just I aspire to love and accept the pretty, beautiful, successful, orderly parts of ourselves. It's the whole collection, including the unfinishedness. We will discover that we're hurting physically, emotionally. When I discovered dukkha in myself, I aspire to hold myself in sweet compassion. We will discover suffering in the world. To the ability, to the capacity we have. I aspire to hold the suffering of the world in sweet compassion. Allowing this moment to be known At one polarity of the great mystery, the separate being sits here, breathes, has its thoughts about who it is, practices for its own welfare, the reduction of our own suffering, the opening of our own hearts. At the other end of the great paradox, there is our interbeing with all beings and all of life. We recognize that with the dedication of merit. May the merit of this practice touch all beings. May it benefit all beings. Beings who are being born today, beings who are dying today. Beings who are near to us and cherished, and beings who are frightening to us, who we hold at a distance, who carry various projections. And so with the sharing of merit, we recognize our interbeing with all of life. And we can form the intention to go through our day mindfully, taking our crystal globe with us on our day, having an intention of loving kindness and compassion in every encounter. And please now let us bring awareness into our buttocks and thighs, legs. Feel the life here. Feel the life in the hands. Notice the life in the face. in the lips, in the cheeks, in the eyes. And notice the intention to open the eyes. Notice the mystery of seeing. Seeing, and notice, is there someone seeing or is there just seeing? Jim's guest house is meeting tonight.
Jim's guest house is taking a night off.
Oh, it is? Oh, I see. Well,
I'm going to be at a meeting with you.
oh, that's right. Huh. I want to say something important here. The issues of inclusion and racial justice and diversity have really come to the fore, and it's a good thing. I'm grateful to those who have been carrying that torch. And I have some sadness about hurt that's happened for people. As you would imagine, I've been doing my best to be conscious and loving and inclusive and have been imperfect. And it affects me. I have a little written statement, but let me just read that and I'll add a little bit because I'll forget stuff otherwise. It's this. I know we've touched on a very tender and for some very painful aspects of dealing with racism and compassionate, skillful action. There's a need for reflection, dialogue, and action in the community. Conversations, and we want to have conversations in which no greater harm occurs. Sensitive conversations of this type need time for silence, deep listening, and pauses, for reflection and integration. The Racial Justice Committee made a great start last week, and we'll be working with them to create a community-wide process for all who are interested. The teachers and board of PIMC are actively looking into ways that we can create safe and useful containers for these conversations so everyone can be safe and be heard. Right now, our meditation gatherings and Dharma talks are not the best context for this sensitive and unfolding discussion. These are issues that are of great importance, and we will continue to bring attention, love, and action to them. I wanted to say that before we start sharing. Please bear with me a moment. There's complexities about who gets to have the car today. Okay, I think it's fixed. We now have a 17-year-old who needs one of the cars. And it gets rather tense. So I wanted to invite us to not continue the conversation we were having. We will continue it for sure. But for these morning times to be what's happening in practice right now. And if there is something happening in your practice right now that has to do with that prior conversation and you want or need to make an I statement about it, let's have that. But not abstract discussion, because it leads to so much suffering, I think, unless we have the right container. So I hope that works. So if you'd like to share something, I'm open. Oh no, I want to say one more thing. I watched that movie, Nomads, last night. I highly recommend watching it. I found myself sobbing at one point about it. Touched a place in me of an ongoing injury in my own family. And this being a human being is so incredibly difficult. And we so easily hurt each other. We hurt each other out of ignorance, and we hurt each other out of our own wounds. And it made, for me, it made even more imperative that I take responsibility for my own practice and my own speech and actions. And with the realization that we really are not here very long. We're not here very long, and there is absolutely no predicting what will be stable tomorrow. And I didn't know until the credits came, most of the actors in that movie were people from real life. They played themselves. So here we are playing ourselves, being ourselves in this stage of life. So I invite your sharing now if you want.
Robert, it's Dave Mayer.
Hi, Dave.
And I spoke yesterday, and I said I would say this today because the morning sessions seem to be populated significantly with different people. And this is, you seem to always be setting the stage for me. An I statement about the session that was had last Wednesday talking about racial justice issues. And going into that was I was roiled with very difficult emotions I didn't understand. It was very painful, and so much of me just didn't want to attend, but I knew that it was important for me to attend. And I asked my wife to be support for me, because she's very much a support for me. And she's not familiar with the Sangha. I was setting the stage by describing, the emotions that were coming up relating to the issues, people involved. And just as Zoom came alive, I was making a disparaging comment about someone involved in the meeting. After dozens and dozens of Zoom sessions, this was the first time I'd ever come up in a Zoom session unmuted. And I just had been living in deep mortification and pain over the fact that went out. It was not intended to communicate the truth of the statement, but to explain to my wife what was going on in me. I did not trust those feelings. And I was not sure people had heard it. I didn't want to create more harm by apologize for something, but I did learn that at least some people heard it. I'm gratified that some people didn't. I've sent an apology to the person. I've not heard back from them, so I don't want to identify them and cause more harm. But I just want to apologize to everybody who was at that meeting. It was extremely well handled. It was skillfully set up. It was really artfully done to create a sacred space. And I, admittedly inadvertently, but I did soil it. And anybody who was there who happened to hear me make that statement, I really apologize. I messed up the space. The meeting went on, it happened. There were probably residual stains on the carpet from that, but I just want to apologize. It was, it's been a huge learning experience for me, I'll tell you that. But I hate to think that it came at the source, at the cost of the pain that I caused. So anyone who was there who heard it, I just apologize to you. I'm deeply, deeply sorry. And thanks for letting me share.
Thanks, David. Probably 15 years ago, I went to a teachers' conference that was held at Spirit Rock and Green Gulch. And the Green Gulch teachers were there, the San Francisco Zen Center teachers. And they were, one of the presentations, I forget how it came about, but one of the presentations, there were 5 of them or 6 of them on stage in front of the 200 or 300 other teachers. And they were talking about their experience of community over 30 years of practicing and living together. And one of them said something that I found really helpful, which was, Sangha is like a rock polisher. You put the rocks in and you put in the rouge, the grinding substance, and then you turn the rock, it turns, and it turns day in and day out. And in the case of a Sangha, it does this over years. And this person said, over the decades, the grinding between us has resulted in polishing off some of the rough edges of our personalities. It really is important that we're patient with each other. Because there isn't one of us that doesn't have shadow elements we are totally unaware of. And we have incredible love and compassion as well. And without each other, we can't find out where the rough edges are. The faux pas, the glaring mistakes.
Hey, Robert, it's Neil.
I hear a voice.
It's Neil.
Hi, Neil.
I have an I statement for you. I felt anger last week during the morning sessions about this topic. It has come up, and I felt it today. And I just wanted to, I didn't do a good enough job of vocalizing that, and I couldn't really find the right moment to do so. And I think I just wanted to say that aloud and to be heard. And, I think I'm all about containment. I love containment for myself, this idea of containment. And, I just wanted to say that.
Thanks, Neil.
Good morning, Robert. It's Joe.
Good morning, Joe.
And I can make you feel so much better about the challenges that you have with technology because I cannot chat for some reason or figure out how on my phone. But I was asked a question, and I want to say that thank you for asking, Had. And Sky, when I left her at the coast yesterday, was well. But she is not with me this morning. She's at the coast this week. And so I do not know if she will be here this week or not. Kind of a retreat, I believe, for her. Life is good as far as I know. Thank you for asking. And if I can get her to show me how to text or chat, then I will not be having to do so verbally to everyone. But in the meantime, in case anyone else was wondering, there you go.
I've been actively meditating for 50 years. January 25th was my 50th birthday, so to speak. I've also had, I think it would be accurate to say, thousands of therapy sessions. I've had 2 therapeutic relationships that lasted over 10 years, where I got to really know and was known by the loving elder that I had the privilege to be with. I heard the teachings on dukkha 50 years ago. I still don't like it. I don't like it that the first noble truth is that there's really difficulty. It is dawning on me ever so slowly that any identification with a separate identity, any identification with view, any identification, is always fraught with dukkha. And I remember, you remember Rajneesh, Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh? I went very early when I was 27, my first wife and I took 25 students Lewis and Clark students to India for 5 months, which was insane. But the first place we went was Pune. We were there for 6 weeks. And every morning we'd get up early and we'd ride in a tuk-tuk, one of those little horribly polluting little creatures across town very early, and we'd be there and we'd do dynamic meditation, and then he would do his talk, and it was a very potent cult. But anyway, I remember one of the things he said that I didn't like. He said that the nature of relationship is conflictual, and that's not what I want. I want relationship to be. Let's always be in deep, intimate connection, and my growing up made it clear that conflict was really dangerous, really dangerous. And so, to have conflict and challenge in our community, it's really hard. And to acknowledge the conflict and difficulty within ourselves as normal, I think that's really hard too. That it's so easy to have the idea that when I meditated, if I was doing it right, it would always be calm and tranquil. And that I don't experience that to be true. Sometimes it's really messy inside. And so the question is, can I be bold enough and wise enough and strong enough to accept, well, there's some of these old confusions and conflicts are still there. And maybe it's possible to become more and more aware of them and actually acknowledge that they're just as much a part of the journey as the sweet, blissful, beautiful, extraordinarily ecstatic times. Sometimes it's just messy. And how do I then continue to practice, continue to show up, continue to forgive myself and others?
Robert?
I hear Tim.
It occurs to me that one of the biggest differences between real life and a story is that a story has a shape, a beginning, rising action, et cetera, and a resolution. And at the end of the story, there's a satisfactory resolution. Same thing with the piece of music. At the end of the piece of music, there's a final chord and resolution. And
Yeah.
and in real life, that's not the case. That's one of the differences, and that's one of the ways you can tell real life from a story.
Sometimes there is.
Thanks, Tim.
Sometimes.
Hi, it's Carol.
Hello, Carol.
Hi. So after after meditating together for a year on Zoom, I still remember what Had said a year ago when COVID started. He said, "This is what we've all been meditating for. Life is what we've all been meditating for." So it's really stuck with me all this time.
Thanks, Carol.
Robert, Tim's comment really triggered something for me. In one of my first retreats with you, I remember having this conversation with you. You told the story of, it was Buddha's brother, but it was a story where he had gathered forces and was going to attack a city, and encountered Buddha and sat and talked with Buddha and gave some teachings, and the guy said, "Well, I'll go away and think about that." I'm truly screwing up the story, I know, but I hope you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
And then the guy came back again, and they had another encounter, and he went away, and then the guy came back and destroyed the city. And I found that deeply unsatisfying in my first learnings about Buddhism, because it was supposed to have a happy ending. You know, Buddha was supposed to be able, with the strength of his wisdom, to speaking to this fellow, that he was supposed to allow him to see the real truth and not destroy the city. And it was an utterly unsatisfying story for me. And it was a story. I mean, it was life as opposed to a story. And that's really stuck with me in terms of what I originally thought I needed or expected from a quote unquote religion, and what we're dealing with here.
There are two ruins, Kapilavastu 1, which is in Nepal, and Kapilavastu 2, which is in India. And the two countries are vying for which is the real city of the Buddha's birth, because of tourism. I don't know if it's been determined. Would the real Kapilavastu please stand up? But they were both real. And the estimate is that the death toll was 60,000. The story is that a cousin, I think it was a cousin of the Buddha, was promised a princess bride. These are little girls, of course, right? 10-year-old girls or less. She was promised the princess bride, and for some reason the people of the Kapilavastu people sent a commoner, and it was found out that he had been sent a commoner little girl, and so he was very ashamed, and he decided to wage war on Kapilavastu, and he was on his way there, and the Buddha heard of it, and he went and sat, the story goes, he sat under a little scrawny tree. And when the cousin came along, he said, he saw the Buddha sitting there. He said, "What are you doing here?" And he said, and why are you sitting out in the sunshine with not enough shade? And he says, "Oh, well, just your presence and the presence of my family, my kinspeople so close by, cools my blood, and why don't you cool your blood too?" And it worked twice. He went back twice. The third time, however, he was incensed. He'd go back and he'd think it would be okay, and then people would rile him up, and he'd get caught in his insanity, and then he would head off on the warpath again. And then the story goes, it's in the Pali Canon, that the Buddha didn't intervene the third time. That he realized there's no way I can stop this. And I can see that's a pretty unsatisfying story, isn't it? And most people who met the Buddha were not impressed. Right? There were nations at war around it. At the time of his death, there was war going on around him. When he died, he'd been King Bimbisara had been a great patron for decades. And Bimbisara's son decided it was time for him to be on the throne, and he killed Bimbisara, and he kicked the Buddha and his monks out. So the Buddha was 82 years old. His place where he was going to spend the rainy system was closed to him, and he was on the road, and they don't know where he was going, with a small community of monks when he died of food poisoning. It wasn't, and life isn't rainbows, and it's real life. And I find in a certain strange way great comfort in that. Because it means my life is an ordinary life, and I'm doing the best I can. And there's no telling how it will end, this particular life. And all the traditions have fantasies like this. I had a friend, an acquaintance, who was a quite famous, actually, name recognition-wise, Tibetan Buddhist, a Western Tibetan Buddhist. And there was a very famous man, the Karmapa. There's the Karmapa, the Dalai Lama, and the Panchen Lama, the three top lamas of the Tibetan world, and the story is that they when one dies, the other two find the next incarnation, and they're very important personages. And the Karmapa died, the old Karmapa. There's a young Karmapa, he's probably 25 now, maybe older, but anyway, he died, and the stories came out about how he died. And that he sat up in bed, and that he went into deep samadhi, deep concentration, and then the rainbow body emerged and went, and so on, and that he stayed sitting. And what my acquaintance said was that actually he was there, and he died an ordinary death with tubes in his arms, and he was in a hospital bed, and he died. Now, one has to be careful. These days, saying that could be deeply offensive to somebody, because their belief is that this great Lama set a course or showed what's possible. And maybe what's possible is that we can become more and more fully human, and we can have compassion for each other because we're ordinary. Ordinary, and therefore, of course, very beautiful and worthy of compassion. And there's been 3 deaths in Jennifer's family in the last 2 weeks. And remembering Rena Sirkar, my teacher briefly in San Francisco, remembering this, how can we be anything but loving and compassionate? I mean, if we dare to let ourselves recognize what's true, how can we hold on to any animosities and hatreds and ordinary and vulnerable?
Beautiful.
I heard a voice. So I think I want to say this. For anything I've said or done in ignorance, out of ignorance, I ask your forgiveness. And I ask you to let me know. Write me. I have a human shadow. I've been known to really fall on my face. And so, yeah, I guess I would say this. If I say or do something that's offensive or feels harmful to you, please don't just disappear. Let me know. How else could I possibly learn?
Robert, this is Lexi.
Hi, Lexi.
Hello. I don't believe we've met yet, but I've followed your voice for 2 years.
Hi.
I had a question pertaining to the story of the Buddha that you shared. I was wondering if we ever think that the Buddha made mistakes. Speaking of humanness and vulnerability.
I think you would find many who would say no, but I don't, that doesn't make any sense to me at all, and I am certain the Buddha made some serious mistakes. And that it cost him followers, and that he had remorse. There's very much a part of, in monk world, I think it's once a month when they gather at the new moon or the full moon, or maybe it's twice a month, that there's kind of an open confession time. There's a structure for it, for monks to say, well, I really screwed up here. And that was built right into the teachings. So yes, I think the Buddha was much more ordinary than we let on, and that he was also awake. And with all that means in terms of his capacity to understand what's true. And I don't think that the Buddha, why get in such trouble for this? Just spouting off these opinions. But how did I say this? I think there's a lot more awakened women in Asia than there are men, because there's at least 3 times as many women practicing deeply as there are men. The monks have the power. The monks are, they've got control of that, but the meditation halls are full of women. And so awakening doesn't have any. Being male doesn't give one some ultimate advantage in terms of waking up. Being a human being who's curious about the Dharma is what gives us the opportunity to wake up. And Buddhism in Asia is remarkably sexist. Shockingly sexist, actually. and traditional, right? It's only in the last eye blink of human development that we're approximating. We're beginning to approximate inclusion and equality across genders of all kinds. It's a brand new idea. Who was it? There's a Jungian analyst. I'm not going to remember her name. Brilliant person. I heard her talk one time, who said that true intimacy in heterosexual relationships is just beginning, because until both people have enough power and the capacity to leave, there can't be real intimacy because of the power differentials. So that's more than you asked about, but that's where the mind went. What is there more to your question? I'm curious. Is there a background to it? You're muted, unfortunately.
I was thinking, I apologize. Your answer was beautiful. My question underneath that question was, in relation to the apology that was shared earlier, I was wondering what parts of ourselves do we identify most with? And it seems like we can identify with actions that we take, whether they're positive or negative. We can identify with the reflection upon those actions. We could try to identify with none of it. It seems like there's pain in each of those answers. And I guess that's where the thought of mistake came from, because it seemed like in another Sangha member's disappointment with that story, I was also disappointed because it felt like the Buddha gave up on him. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and there's so much we could unpack with that. Have you had the experience where you gave up on somebody, where you realized, I get it. I can't, no matter what I do, this person has this, they're hell-bent on this particular course, and it's not going to be pretty. And that's the way I've made sense of that. And I find it then useful guidance in that way. But I think ultimately where the Dharma leads us is not to identify with any of it. That this is an impersonal process rolling on, and we do our best, and we can become more and more taking responsibility for our thoughts, speech, and actions, and we can become much more skillful in living our lives. On one end of the polarity, one can aspire to be a more and more ethical and loving and kind and compassionate person. And on the other end of the polarity, one realizes that one is everything already anyway. And both are true. Thanks. Well, it's 8:30. I am needed elsewhere and committed. Committed not to the asylum, but committed to a meeting. So let's do Bhavatu Sabe Mangalam, our true to form. May all beings receive all blessings. Please unmute if you wish. Bhavatu Sabe Mangalam. Bhavatu Sabe Mangalam
Mangalam.
Bhavatu Sabbe Mangalam. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu.
So thank you, dear friends, and David and the handful of others. I think I'm not going to do the dance morning, the movement morning tomorrow. Thank you. Too much happening.
Thanks for letting me know.
Thanks,
Happy
Carol.
trails, everybody. See you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Goodbye, lovely
Hey, Stephen.
friends. Goodbye, friends on Facebook and YouTube.